The human had been on the ship for exactly 12 days when everything went wrong. Not wrong in the way humans usually expected. No alarms, no strange smells, no system failures. In fact, the day had started in a very calm and ordinary way. The lights in the shared corridor slowly brightened to simulate a human sunrise. The air recyclers hummed softly. Somewhere far away, an alien species that communicated through color pulses was having what sounded like a very loud argument, though it was apparently polite by their standards. The human, named Elias Ward, adjusted the collar of his uniform and reminded himself to breathe. This was fine. Everything was fine. Elias was not a soldier, not a scientist, and definitely not a hero. He was a cultural liaison, which was a polite way of saying his job was to not mess things up. Humanity's place on the interstellar stage was still fragile. One wrong gesture, one misunderstood phrase, and years of careful diplomacy could collapse.
So Elias followed rules.
He listened more than he spoke. He smiled when appropriate. He avoided jokes, sarcasm, and anything that could be taken as flirting. Especially flirting. Today, the entire crew had been ordered to attend a general assembly in the main observation hall. These meetings were rare and important, usually meant for announcements that affected every species on board. Elias took his place among the others, standing on a platform adjusted to human height. Around him were beings of every shape and size. Tall, thin figures with reflective skin. Compact creatures with too many eyes. One species floated slightly above the floor, supported by a field generator that gave off a soft glow. Elias kept his hands visible and relaxed at his sides. That was considered respectful by most species. He hoped the commander of the ship, a being with a voice that sounded like layered echoes, began speaking. The words were translated directly into Elias's ear implant. "Crew of the exploration vessel," the commander said, "we acknowledge the completion of the latest survey cycle. Efficiency remains within acceptable parameters. Cooperation between species has improved."
So far, so good. Elias let his mind drift slightly, just enough to relax without losing focus.
He noticed movement to his left. She stood very still, which was unusual for her species. Elias had learned that they were normally expressive, with subtle changes in posture and skin tone. Her name was Cyelen, and she was part of the ship's xenological analysis team. They had spoken only a few times. Always polite, always professional. Elias remembered thinking she was easy to talk to, which was rare on this ship. She asked careful questions and listened closely to the answers. Elias did not notice her step forward until it was already happening. The sound of movement caught the attention of the entire hall. The commander paused. Dozens of alien eyes turned. Cyelen moved to the center of the assembly space, directly in front of Elias. His stomach tightened. This was not part of the schedule. She raised her hands in a precise motion, one Elias had seen before in recorded briefings, but had never expected to witness in person. The lights above subtly shifted color, responding to a protocol Elias did not understand. Cylen spoke, her voice clear and calm. "I formally mark Elias Ward," she said, "as my chosen mate." Silence followed. Not quiet, not peaceful. A heavy, stunned silence that felt like the ship itself had stopped breathing. Elias's brain refused to process the words at first. "Mate." The translation was correct. He knew the term. He knew it very well. This was bad. Very bad. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some species produced audible clicks or color shifts that Elias's implant struggled to interpret quickly enough. The commander did not speak. That alone was terrifying. Elias felt heat rush to his face. Every instinct screamed at him to say something. Anything but training held him still. Humans did not react impulsively during alien rituals. That was rule number 1. Cylen turned slightly toward him, her expression unreadable by human standards, but intent nonetheless. "It is done," she added, as if clarifying a simple fact. Elias swallowed. This could not be happening. His implant flooded his mind with delayed cultural notes, alarms triggered by keywords. His heart began to race, marking. Mate. Public declaration. Irrevocable. "Oh, no," Elias whispered, barely aware he had spoken aloud. The commander finally reacted.
"This assembly is."
Paused, the commander said carefully. Crew members began talking all at once. The observation hall filled with noise, overlapping languages, sudden movements. Several beings looked directly at Elias with what his implant identified as shock, curiosity, and something uncomfortably close to awe. Elias wanted to disappear. Sailene remained calm. She stood beside him now, close enough that he could feel a slight warmth radiating from her skin. "You did not respond," she said softly.
"Are you unwell?" Elias started, then stopped himself.
He took a breath. "I think there has been a misunderstanding." Her head tilted. "There is no misunderstanding. I followed established criteria." That's great," Elias said weakly.
"But humans don't!" The commander raised one limb, silencing the room. "Human Elias Ward," the commander said. "Do you contest the declaration?" Every eye turned to him. This was it. This was the moment that would go into official records. Elias felt very small. He thought of Earth, of the long meetings, the careful planning, the warnings drilled into him before boarding the ship. Do not offend. Do not impose. Do not panic. He chose his words, slowly. "I do not understand the declaration well enough to accept or reject it," he said. "I request time to learn." The translator hesitated for a fraction of a second before delivering his words to the room. The silence returned, different this time, curious. Sailene studied him closely. "You are uncertain," she said.
"Yes," Elias replied honestly. "In human culture, choosing a mate requires mutual discussion and consent."
Public declarations come later. This caused a visible reaction. Several crew members leaned toward one another. Color patterns flickered. One being let out a sound that the implant translated as surprised amusement. Silent frowned, a subtle change Elias almost missed.
"Your behavior indicated compatibility," she said.
"You demonstrated patience, empathy, and adaptability. You listened without dominance."
"You adjusted your communication style."
"These are rare traits. Deepen." Elias felt his embarrassment deepen. "I was just doing my job," he said.
"That does not lessen its value," she replied. "The commander cleared its throat equivalent."
This situation is unprecedented. That was the commander's way of saying everything was on fire without actually saying it. Elias's implant updated again, displaying emergency cultural analysis. Silene's species bonded seriously and rarely. A public marking meant long-term partnership, shared social standing, and diplomatic implications. If Elias rejected her outright, it could be seen as a deep insult. If he accepted without understanding, it could bind humanity to something they were not ready for. Either way, the consequences were massive.
"I would like to propose a pause,"
Elias said carefully. Not a rejection, not an acceptance. A pause for learning. The commander considered this. Sailene was silent for a long moment. Then she nodded once. "A pause is acceptable," she said. "I will not withdraw the mark unless you request it." That somehow made Elias feel both relieved and more afraid. The commander formally ended the assembly, dismissing the crew with instructions to maintain discretion. That instruction was immediately ignored, as Elias could feel attention following him as he walked. Sailene accompanied him without asking. They walked in silence down the corridor, side by side. "You did not react as I expected," she said eventually.
"I didn't react the way I expected either." Elias admitted. This does not distress you? It does, he said.
Just quietly. She seemed to think about that. This will change how others perceive you, she said. Elias laughed once, weak and tired. That already happened. They stopped at an intersection where their paths would normally separate. Silen faced him fully now. I will give you time, she said. But know this, I chose you. Carefully. Elias met her gaze. And I promise, he said, I will treat that choice with respect. She inclined her head and walked away. Elias leaned against the wall after she left, letting out a long breath he felt like he had been holding since the assembly began. He activated his calm. Earth, he said quietly, we have a situation. And somewhere across the ship, species who had once considered humans unreadable began to reassess everything they thought they knew. Elias did not sleep that night. The lights in his quarters dimmed, as scheduled, the ship quietly moving through open space. But his mind refused to slow down. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the observation hall again. The silence, the way every alien eye had turned toward him, the word mate echoing in his thoughts like a warning alarm that never shut off. His wrist console blinked softly, showing unread messages. Too many. Some were official. Requests for clarification. Requests for reports. Requests for emergency cultural analysis. Others were not official at all. Curious questions. Polite congratulations. Confused congratulations. One message, translated very carefully by his implant, appeared to be a betting pool. Elias groaned and rolled onto his side. This was supposed to be a quiet assignment. By the time the ship's internal clock marked the start of the next work cycle, Elias had given up on sleep entirely. He sat up, ran a hand through his hair, and prepared himself for whatever was waiting outside his door. It turned out to be 3 beings from 3 different species, all standing there as if they had coordinated it, even though Elias strongly suspected they had not. One of them was part of the ship's mediation council. That was bad. Human Elias Ward, the mediator said, their voice smooth and measured.
You are requested for immediate consultation.
Elias nodded. I figured. As they walked through the corridors, Elias noticed the stairs more clearly now.
Conversation stopped when he passed. Some crew members looked at him with open interest. Others looked away, as if unsure how to behave around him anymore. Humans had gone from new and strange to something else overnight. The consultation room was already occupied when Elias arrived. Silene stood near the far wall, her posture calm but alert. Several other representatives were present, each one a specialist in cultural law or social protocol. Elias took a seat and resisted the urge to sink into it. The mediator began. This gathering is to address the public marking that occurred during the previous assembly. Silene inclined her head. It was valid, yes, the mediator said carefully, by your people's standards. All eyes turned to Elias again. Human standards differ, Elias said, keeping his voice steady.
Significantly, one of the representatives leaned forward. Explain. Elias took a breath.
This was his job. This was literally why he was here. In human culture, he said, choosing a partner is a private process. Public announcements come after both people agree and understand what they are committing to. Choice without consent is not considered a bond. It is considered a mistake. That word caused a visible ripple through the room. Silene frowned slightly. You are saying my choice may be invalid? I'm saying, Elias replied gently, that without mutual understanding, it cannot mean the same thing to both of us. Silence followed, thoughtful rather than shocked this time. One of the council members spoke. Your species prioritizes individual autonomy. Yes, Elias said, very strongly. Silene looked at him, studying his face in a way that made him suddenly aware of how much she had already been observing him before this. You never displayed rejection, she said. You shared stories.
You adjusted your schedule to assist me. You remembered personal details. Elias felt his ears warm.
That's basic kindness for humans. Several beings reacted to that. Your species is inefficient, one muttered, not unkindly.
Elias almost laughed. The mediator raised a hand. The issue before us is not intent, but impact. The marking has already altered social dynamics aboard this vessel. That was an understatement. Reports began appearing on the room's central display, crew interactions shifting, informal hierarchies adjusting. Species that had previously ignored humans were suddenly requesting meetings. Elias stared at the data. "We didn't plan this," he said quietly. "No," the mediator agreed. "But it is happening." Selene stepped forward. "I will not withdraw the mark unless Elias Ward asks me to." Every eye turned to him again. Elias felt the weight of it pressed down on his chest. This was not just about feelings anymore. This was about precedent. About what humans represented out here, beyond Earth. "If I ask you to remove it," he said slowly, "would it harm you?" Selene did not answer immediately. "It would cause questions. Would it dishonor you?"
Yes.
Elias exhaled through his nose. "Of course it would." The mediator spoke again. "There may be an alternative." All attention shifted. "A provisional interpretation," the mediator continued. "A temporary classification, neither bond nor rejection. A human-defined evaluation period." Silent looked uncertain. "Such ambiguity is rare." "It is common for humans," Elias said quickly. "We call it getting to know each other." That phrase went through several translation filters before settling. Selene considered this. "You would evaluate me? And you would evaluate me?" Elias said. "As equals." The idea seemed to spread through the room, strange but not unpleasant. One of the council members tilted their head. This could serve as a cultural study. That was the first time Elias felt something like hope. The mediator nodded. "Agreed." The marking remained symbolically acknowledged, but socially suspended. No obligations enforced. Observation only. Selene turned to Elias. "Is this acceptable to you?" Elias met her gaze. "Yes, if you're willing." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I am." The meeting ended shortly after, but the consequences did not. By the time Elias returned to his quarters, the ship felt different. Not hostile, not friendly. Curious, too curious. His console chimed constantly. Invitations to meals, requests for interviews. Questions that ranged from sincere to wildly inappropriate. One message stood out. It was from Selene. "I have been informed that human courtship involves shared activities," it read. "Please advise." Elias stared at the message, then laughed softly despite himself. He typed back, "Yes, usually simple ones." "Such as?" Elias thought for a moment. "Talking. Eating. Learning how the other person thinks."
There was a pause before the reply came.
"I believe we are already doing this." Elias smiled.
Later that cycle, they met in one of the ship's neutral lounges.
The space had been adjusted to accommodate multiple species, which resulted in a strange but comfortable layout. They sat across from each other, a low table between them. "This is not an interrogation," Elias said, sensing her focus. "I know," she replied. "But I wish to do it correctly." "There isn't really a correct way," he said. "Just honesty." She considered that. "Very well. Why did you choose to work among other species instead of remaining with your own?" Elias leaned back slightly. "Because we don't grow if we only talk to ourselves." That answer seemed to satisfy her. As they talked, Elias became aware of something strange. The tension he had expected was not there. Instead, there was curiosity. Real curiosity, The kind that didn't demand answers, only understanding. Around them, other crew members pretended very badly not to listen. By the end of the meeting, word had already spread. Humans did not dominate. Humans did not submit. Humans negotiated. And somewhere deep in the ship's data archives, classifications began to change. Not because humans demanded it, but because they asked a simple question no one else had thought to ask. Do you choose this too? By the third day after the assembly, the ship no longer felt like the same place. It was not loud or chaotic. There were no alarms, no raised voices. Instead, there was a quiet shift, the kind that humans were very good at noticing, but very bad at explaining. People stood a little farther apart. Conversations paused when Elias walked past. Some crew members watched him with open interest now, while others avoided him completely. Human Elias Ward had become a reference point. Elias noticed it first during breakfast. The food synthesizer produced a tray that was slightly different from his usual one. The nutritional balance was the same, but the arrangement was more careful, more deliberate. Someone had adjusted it. He frowned at it, then glanced around the shared dining area. A few beings from other species sat nearby, pretending to focus on their own meals. One of them looked at Elias, then quickly looked away.
Elias sighed. "So this is my life now," he muttered.
Across the room, Len watched him. She had chosen the seat deliberately, not too close, not too far. Elias noticed that as well. She was observing boundaries, which he appreciated more than he could easily explain.
"You appear unsettled," she said when he joined her. "I'm getting used to being stared at," Elias replied.
It's not my favorite human experience. Your species attracts attention, Sayalin said calmly. This has merely focused it.
That's one way to put it. They ate in relative silence for a few moments.
Elias was aware of how normal this felt, which somehow made everything else feel even stranger. Then Len spoke again. "I have received inquiries," she said. Elias nearly choked on his food. "Please tell me they're not asking for details." "They are asking about consent," she replied. Elias froze. "About what?" "Consent," Len repeated. "Several species wish to understand how humans define it, why it is necessary, and why it appears to override compatibility metrics." Elias slowly set his utensil down. "Oh," he said quietly. "That's big. Yes." The ship's internal network had begun spreading summaries of the Mediation Council's decision. The phrase, human-defined evaluation period, was appearing in reports, logs, and informal discussions. What had started as a personal misunderstanding was becoming a concept. That scared Elias more than anything else so far. "I didn't mean to start a philosophical movement," he said.
"You did not," Len replied. "You demonstrated one. That was worse."
Later that cycle, Elias was called into another meeting. This one was larger, less formal, and far more dangerous. Representatives from multiple species were present, not as officials, but as interested parties. Curiosity could be just as risky as hostility. The room buzzed with low conversation until Elias entered. Then, slowly, it quieted. The mediator from before gestured for him to sit. "This is an informal discussion. No binding decisions will be made." Elias did not trust that at all. One of the representatives spoke first. "Human Elias Ward, is it true that your species considers an unchosen bond invalid, regardless of its efficiency?" "Yes," Elias said. "Efficiency is not the goal." "Then what is?" Elias paused. He had explained this to humans before, but never to an entire room of beings who had evolved under completely different assumptions. "Choice," he said. "Trust. Willing participation." A being with translucent skin leaned forward. "Those are inefficient variables." "They are," Elias agreed. "But they create stability." That caught their attention. Sayilin watched him carefully, saying nothing.
Explain, another voice said.
Elias took a breath. If someone chooses a bond freely, they protect it. They work through problems. They grow together. If they are forced, even gently, they will resist, maybe quietly, maybe slowly. But resistance always costs more in the end. The room went silent. Several species processed this information differently. Elias could see it in the way their bodies shifted, the colors that changed, the subtle movements his implant tried to translate into emotion.
You are saying, one representative said slowly, that consent is not a delay. It is an investment.
Elias nodded. That's a good way to put it. That phrase appeared instantly in the shared display, flagged for further analysis. Elias felt a strange mix of pride and fear. After the meeting, he found Scifi waiting for him in the corridor.
You spoke well, she said. I spoke honestly, Elias replied.
Those aren't always the same thing. She considered that. Your honesty has caused disruption. Yeah, he said. Humans are good at that too. They walked together in silence for a bit. Do you regret your choice? Elias asked suddenly.
Silence stopped. I regret nothing, she said.
But I am reevaluating my understanding. That felt fair. Over the next few days, requests began arriving not just from within the ship, but from outside it. Other vessels, other stations, even a diplomatic relay from Earth asked for clarification. Elias spent hours answering questions, always careful, always precise. He refused to define humans as superior. He refused to criticize other cultures. He simply explained how humans worked. Some species listened, some did not. But none ignored him anymore. One evening, as the ship drifted between survey points, Elias and Scifi sat together in the observation lounge, watching stars slide past the transparent barrier. This place makes humans quiet, Scifi observed. It reminds us how small we are, Elias said, yet your influence is expanding. He smiled faintly. We don't mean to. We just talk. Scifi looked at him, her expression thoughtful. If I had not marked you, this would not have happened.
That's true, Elias admitted.
But if you hadn't, something else would have. Eventually. Humans don't stay invisible for long. Ooh. She seemed to accept that. There is something I must ask, she said. Elias turned toward her. Okay, if after this evaluation period you choose not to continue, she said carefully, what will that mean? Elias thought about it. About the ship. About Earth. About the records that would outlast both of them.
It will mean, he said slowly, that two people learned from each other and walked away with respect. Scifi absorbed that, and if you choose to continue, then it means the same thing, Elias said.
Just together. She was silent for a long time after that. Somewhere else on the ship, a report was finalized. It categorized humans under a new descriptor. Not aggressive. Not submissive. Not predictable. Adaptive, through consent-based social structures. The classification spread quietly. Elias did not see it. He was too busy being human. But the stars outside seemed to watch, patient and curious, as a small species once again proved that strength did not always come from force. Sometimes it came from asking the other side if they were willing. The pressure did not arrive all at once. It came in quiet messages, careful pauses, and questions that were never directly asked. Elias felt it everywhere now, like the ship itself was watching him think. By the start of the next cycle, it was clear that the evaluation period was no longer just between him and Scifi. Other species were paying attention not as observers anymore, but as participants who believed something important was happening. Scifi felt it too. She received a transmission from her people while she was working in the analysis wing. It was formal, coded in layered meanings, and impossible to misunderstand. They were concerned. Her species did not panic easily, but this situation was spreading beyond expected limits. The public marking had already been recorded. The delay, the evaluation, the public discussion of consent. These were deviations. They asked her to explain. Lane requested time before responding. That alone was unusual. When she found Elias later, he could tell something had changed. She stood straighter, but her movements were slower, as if she were carrying invisible weight. "They contacted you," Elias said.
"Yes," she replied. He nodded. "Let me guess. They don't like uncertainty. They consider it destabilizing."
Elias exhaled. "Join the club." They walked together toward a quieter section of the ship. The corridors here were dimmer, less traveled. Elias appreciated the space to think. "What do they want you to do?" he asked.
"To clarify my intent," Silen said. "To complete the bond or dissolve it."
Elias stopped walking.
"And what do you want to do?"
Silen did not answer right away.
"I believed I understood you," she said finally.
"Your behavior. Your values. I believed compatibility was enough. And now?" "And now," she said softly, "I understand that compatibility without choice is incomplete." Elias felt a tightness in his chest he hadn't expected. "That understanding is already a lot," he said. "It may cost me," she replied. That scared him more than any diplomatic message. Later that cycle, the mediator summoned them both. This time, the room was filled, not crowded, but heavy with presence. Representatives from many species attended, including remote projections from allied vessels. This was no longer local. The mediator spoke slowly, choosing words with care. "The evaluation period has reached a point where clarification is required." Elias knew what that meant. Silene stepped forward. "I request permission to speak." The mediator inclined their head. Silene faced the room. "My people believe bonds are strongest when chosen through long observation and analysis. I followed that belief. However, I have learned that human bonds require explicit mutual consent, not implied acceptance."
There was movement in the room. Interest?
"Tension. I did not ask Elias Ward if he chose me," she continued. "I assume." Elias felt every eye turn toward her. "That assumption," she said, "was a failure of understanding." The room was silent. Elias felt something shift, not around him, but inside him. This was not easy for her. This was public. This mattered. "I therefore request," Silene said, "to withdraw the mark unless Elias Ward chooses to continue of his own will." A wave of reaction passed through the room. Shock, disbelief, respect. The mediator looked at Elias. The weight settled fully now. This was the breaking point everyone had been waiting for. Elias stood. His legs felt steady, which surprised him. "When this started," he said, "I thought I had caused a disaster. A few beings reacted with what his implant translated as amusement.
I was afraid of offending people, of making the wrong choice.
Of speaking for all humans when I'm just one person." He paused. "But I learned something," he continued. "Every species here values strength."
You just define it differently. Humans define it as the ability to choose, even when it's uncomfortable.
He looked at Sialen. She chose to listen. She chose to learn. That matters to us. The room waited. "I will not ask her to carry a mark I didn't choose," Elias said. "And I will not accept a bond out of pressure." A quiet spread through the room. "But," he added, "I choose to continue the evaluation. Publicly. Clearly. As equals." The silence broke. Not into noise, but into understanding. The mediator spoke. "This sets precedent." "Yes," Elias said.
"It does."
Sialen looked at him, something like relief visible in her posture. After the meeting, messages flooded in. Some praised the decision, some questioned it. A few warned of long-term consequences. Elias ignored most of them. Instead, he and Ellen returned to the observation lounge. "You could have ended it," she said.
I could have, he agreed, but I didn't want to.
She studied him.
"Is this human stubbornness?" He smiled. "Absolutely." For the first time since the assembly, she laughed.
It was a quiet sound, brief and genuine. Across the ship, reports were updated again. This time, the language was different. Humans were not just adaptive. They were disruptive through empathy. As the ship continued its journey, one truth became clear to everyone watching. Whatever happened next would not just affect Elias and Len. It would affect how the galaxy understood choice itself. And there was no going back now. The ship moved quietly through space, but nothing about it felt quiet anymore. What had begun as a single moment in an assembly hall had grown into something that reached far beyond metal walls and shared corridors. Messages arrived daily now from other ships, other stations, and even distant councils that had never spoken directly to humans before. They all wanted to understand. Elias felt tired, but not the kind of tired that came from fear. This was the tiredness that followed responsibility. He stood in the observation lounge alone, watching stars drift past like slow thoughts. Somewhere behind him, footsteps approached. He did not turn. He already knew who it was. "You avoid your quarters," Len said gently. "They feel too small lately," Elias replied. She joined him at the viewport, standing beside him without touching. That had become their unspoken rule. Space was offered, not taken. "My people have sent another message," she said.
Elias nodded. I figured they would. They have reviewed the records, she continued.
"They consider my actions unprecedented." "That sounds familiar," Elias said with a small smile. "They believe I should either complete the bond or formally release you." Elias looked at her then.
"And what do you believe?" Silene did not answer right away. She watched the stars instead.
"I believe," she said slowly, "that the bond I attempted to create no longer exists in the form I understood." Elias felt his chest tighten, though he wasn't sure why. "But," she added, "something else does." That eased him. The formal assembly was scheduled the next cycle. No one said it out loud, but everyone knew it would be watched far beyond the ship. Translations were prepared, records would be archived, decisions would echo. Elias stood once more in the center of the observation hall, surrounded by beings from dozens of species. This time, the silence felt different. Expectant, not shocked. Len stood across from him. The mediator spoke. "This assembly has been convened to conclude the matter of the public marking and its implications." Len stepped forward. "I speak now not only for myself," she said, "but for my people." Her voice was calm, but Elias could sense the weight behind it. "I withdraw the mate mark placed upon Elias Ward," she said clearly.
"It was made without explicit consent. That is no longer acceptable to me."
A ripple moved through the room. Elias felt something lift from his shoulders, even though he had expected this.
"But," Len continued, "I request recognition of a different bond."
The room stilled again. "A human-defined bond," she said. "Voluntary. Non-binding. Chosen." She turned to Elias. "Friendship." The word passed through translation systems, struggling to find perfect equivalents. Some species had similar concepts, others did not. Elias felt his throat tighten. He stepped forward. "I accept." The moment landed softly, but deeply. No alarms sounded, no protocols broke. But something changed. The mediator recorded the declaration. Let it be noted, the mark is withdrawn. A voluntary interpersonal bond is acknowledged. Across the ship, data systems updated. Classifications shifted. Observations were logged. Later, much later, historians would struggle to explain why this moment mattered so much. But those present felt it immediately. After the assembly, the ship did not celebrate. It adjusted. Crew members spoke more openly. Questions were asked that had once been avoided, and some species began revising internal guidelines. Others simply watched and learned. Elias returned to his duties, though his role had changed. He was no longer just a liaison. He had become a reference point, a living example of how humans approached connection. Silene continued her work as well, but she was no longer the same either. Her reports included new language, words like choice, mutual understanding, and emotional consent appeared alongside analysis and metrics. One quiet cycle they sat together in the observation lounge again. "I have been reassigned," Elias said. "Removed?" Silene asked. "Expanded," he replied. "Earth wants me to stay longer," she inclined her head. "They trust you. That makes one of us," he said with a smile. She watched him carefully. "Do you regret not forming a stronger bond?" Elias thought about it. "I think," he said, "we formed exactly the bond we were supposed to." That seemed to satisfy her. As the ship continued its journey, reports spread across known space. Humans were not described as conquerors. They were not described as fragile. They were described as something far more unsettling. Humans asked questions that changed answers. Some species began issuing quiet advisories. Do not assume human compliance. Do not mistake human kindness for agreement. Humans will choose, even when it is inconvenient. Elias never saw those advisories. He was too busy living. One day, as the ship approached its next destination, Silene stood beside him and spoke softly. "In my culture," she said, "being chosen freely is rarer than being marked." Elias smiled. "Then I guess we're both learning." The stars outside continued their endless movement, uncaring and vast. But somewhere among them, a small species had once again left its mark. Not by force, not by fear, but by choosing to ask instead of taking. And the galaxy would never quite be the same again.